Critical thinking, also called critical analysis, is clear, rational thinking involving critique. Its details vary amongst those who define it. According to Barry K.Beyer, critical thinking means making clear, reasoned judgments. During the process of critical thinking, ideas should be reasoned, well thought out, and judged. The National Council for Excellence in Critical Thinking defines critical thinking as the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from, or generated by, observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication, as a guide to belief and action. Etymology. In the term critical thinking, the word critical derives from the word critic and implies a critique. It identifies the intellectual capacity and the means of judging, of judgment, for judging, and of being able to discern. Definitions. Critical thinking is variously defined as the process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information to reach an answer or conclusion. Disciplined thinking that is clear, rational, open-minded, and informed by evidence. Reasonable, reflective thinking focused on deciding what to believe or do. Purposeful, self-regulatory judgment which results in interpretation, analysis, evaluation, and inference, as well as explanation of the evidential, conceptual, methodological, criteriological, or contextual considerations upon which that judgment is based, includes a commitment to using reason in the formulation of our beliefs. In critical social theory, it is a commitment to the social and political practice of participatory democracy, willingness to imagine and to remain open to considering alternative perspectives, willingness to integrate new or revised perspectives into our ways of thinking and acting, and willingness to foster criticality in others. The skill and propensity to engage in an activity with reflective skepticism. Disciplined, self-directed thinking which exemplifies the perfection of thinking appropriate to a particular mode or domain of thinking. Thinking about one's thinking in a manner designed to organize and clarify, raise the efficiency of, and recognize errors and biases in one's own thinking. Critical thinking is not hard thinking, nor is it directed at solving problems. Critical thinking is inward-directed with the intent of maximizing the rationality of the thinker. One does not use critical thinking to solve problems. One uses critical thinking to improve one's process of thinking. Logic and rationality. The ability to reason logically is a fundamental skill of rational agents. Hence, the study of the form of correct argumentation is relevant to the study of critical thinking. Skills. The list of core critical thinking skills includes observation, interpretation, analysis, inference, evaluation, explanation, and metacognition. According to Reynolds, an individual or group engaged in a strong way of critical thinking gives due consideration to establish, for instance, evidence through reality, context skills to isolate the problem from context, relevant criteria for making the judgment well, applicable methods or techniques for forming the judgment, applicable theoretical constructs for understanding the problem and the question at hand. In addition to possessing strong critical thinking skills, one must be disposed to engage problems and decisions using those skills. Critical thinking employs not only logic but broad intellectual criteria such as clarity, credibility, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, significance, and fairness. Procedure. Critical thinking calls for the ability to recognize problems, to find workable means for meeting those problems, understand the importance of prioritization and order of precedence in problem solving, gather and marshal pertinent information, recognize unstated assumptions and values, comprehend and use language with accuracy, clarity, and discernment, interpret data, to appraise evidence and evaluate arguments, recognize the existence of logical relationships between propositions, draw warranted conclusions and generalizations, put to test the conclusions and generalizations at which one arrives, reconstruct one's patterns of beliefs on the basis of wider experience, render accurate judgments about specific things and qualities in everyday life. In sum, a persistent effort to examine any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the evidence that supports or refutes it and the further conclusions to which it tends. Habits are traits of mind. The habits of mind that characterize a person strongly disposed toward critical thinking include a desire to follow reason and evidence wherever they may lead, a systematic approach to problem-solving, inquisitiveness, even-handedness, and confidence in reasoning. According to a definition analysis by Kompf and Amp Bond, critical thinking involves problem-solving, decision-making, metacognition, rationality, rational thinking, reasoning, knowledge, intelligence, and also a moral component such as reflective thinking. Critical thinkers therefore need to have reached a level of maturity in the development, possess a certain attitude as well as a set of taught skills. Research. Edward M. Glaser proposed that the ability to think critically involves three elements: an attitude of being disposed to consider in a thoughtful way the problems and subjects that come within the range of one's experiences, knowledge of the methods of logical inquiry and reasoning, some skill in applying those methods. Educational programs aimed at developing critical thinking in children and adult learners, individually or in group problem-solving and decision-making contexts, continue to address these same three central elements. Contemporary cognitive psychology regards human reasoning as a complex process that is both reactive and reflective. The relationship between critical thinking skills and critical thinking dispositions is an empirical question. Some people have both in abundance, some have skills but not the disposition to use them, some are disposed but lack strong skills, and some have neither. A measure of critical thinking dispositions is the California measure of mental motivation. Education. John Dewey is one of many educational leaders who recognized that curriculum aimed at building thinking skills would benefit the individual, learner, the community, and the entire democracy. Critical thinking is significant in academics due to being significant in learning. Critical thinking is significant in the learning process of internalization, in the construction of basic ideas, principles, and theories inherent in content. And critical thinking is significant in the learning process of application, whereby those ideas, principles, and theories are implemented effectively as they become relevant in learners' lives. Good teachers cultivate critical thinking at every stage of learning, including initial learning. This process of intellectual engagement is at the heart of the Oxford, Durham, Cambridge and London School of Economics tutorials. The tutor questions the students, often in a Socratic manner. The key is that the teacher who fosters critical thinking fosters reflectiveness in students by asking questions that stimulate thinking essential to the construction of knowledge. Each discipline adapts its use of critical thinking concepts and principles. The core concepts are always there, but they are embedded in subject-specific content. For students to learn content, intellectual engagement is crucial. All students must do their own thinking, their own construction of knowledge. Good teachers recognize this and therefore focus on the questions, readings, activities that stimulate the mind to take ownership of key concepts and principles underlying the subject. In the UK school system, critical thinking is offered as a subject that 16 to 18-year-olds can take as an A-level. Under the OCR exam board, students students can sit 2 exam papers for the credibility of evidence and assessing and developing argument. The full advanced GCE is now available. In addition to the 2 units, candidates sit the 2 papers, resolution of dilemmas, and critical reasoning. The A-level tests candidates on their ability to think critically about and analyze arguments on the deductive or inductive validity, as well as producing their own arguments. It also tests their ability to analyze certain related topics such as credibility and ethical decision-making. However, due to its comparative lack of subject content, many universities do not accept it as a main A-level for admissions. Nevertheless, IS is often useful in developing reasoning skills, and the full advanced GCE is useful for degree courses in politics, philosophy, history, theology, providing the skills required for critical analysis that are useful, for example, in biblical study. There used to also be an advanced extension award offered in critical thinking in the UK, open to any A-level student regardless of whether they have the critical thinking A-level. Cambridge International Examinations have an A-level in thinking skills. From 2008, Assessment and Qualifications Alliance has also been offering an A-level critical thinking specification. OCR Exam Board have also modified theirs for 2008. Many examinations for university entrance set by universities, on top of A-level examinations, also include a critical thinking component, such as the LNAT, the UKCAT, the biomedical admissions test and the thinking skills assessment. In Qatar, critical thinking was offered by Al-Barak, which is an outreach, non-traditional educational program that targets high school students and focuses on a curriculum based on STEM fields. The idea behind Al-Barak is to offer high school students the opportunity to connect with the research environment in the Center for Advanced Materials at Qatar University. Faculty members train and mentor the students and help develop and enhance their critical thinking, problem-solving, and teamwork skills. Efficacy. In 1995, a meta-analysis of the literature on teaching effectiveness in higher education was undertaken. The study noted concerns from higher education, politicians and business that higher education was failing to meet society's requirements for well-educated citizens. It concluded that although faculty may aspire to develop students' thinking skills, in practice they have tended to aim at facts and concepts utilizing lowest levels of cognition, rather than developing intellective values. Importance in academia. Critical thinking is an important element of all professional fields and academic disciplines. Within the framework of scientific skepticism, the process of critical thinking involves the careful acquisition and interpretation of information and use of it to reach a well-justified conclusion. The concepts and principles of critical thinking can be applied to any context or case, but only by reflecting upon the nature of that application. Critical thinking forms, therefore, a system of related and overlapping modes of thought such as anthropological thinking, sociological thinking, historical thinking, political thinking, psychological thinking, philosophical thinking, mathematical thinking, chemical thinking, biological thinking, ecological thinking, legal thinking, ethical thinking, musical thinking, thinking like a painter, sculptor, engineer, business person, etc. In other words, though critical thinking principles are universal, their application to disciplines requires a process of reflective contextualization. Critical thinking is considered important in the academic fields because it enables one to analyze, evaluate, explain, and restructure the thinking, thereby decreasing the risk of adopting, acting on, or thinking with a false belief. However, even even with knowledge of the methods of logical inquiry and reasoning. Mistakes can happen due to a thinker's inability to apply the methods or because of character traits such as egocentrism. Critical thinking includes identification of prejudice, bias, propaganda, self-deception, distortion, misinformation, etc. Given research into cognitive psychology, some educators believe that schools should focus on teaching the students critical thinking skills and cultivation of intellectual traits. Critical thinking skills can be used to help nurses during the assessment process. Through the use of critical thinking, nurses can question, evaluate, and reconstruct the nursing care process by challenging the established theory and practice. Critical thinking skills can help nurses problem solve, reflect, and make a conclusive decision about the current situation they face. Critical thinking creates new possibilities for the development of the nursing knowledge. Due to the socio-cultural, environmental, and political issues that are affecting healthcare delivery, it would be helpful to embody new techniques in nursing. Nurses can also engage the critical thinking skills through the Socratic method of dialogue and reflection. This practice standard is even part of some regulatory organizations such as the College of Nurses of Ontario Professional Standards for Continuing Competencies. It requires nurses to engage in reflective practice and keep records of this continued professional development for possible review by the college. Critical thinking also is considered important for human rights education for toleration. The Declaration of Principles on Tolerance adopted by UNESCO in 1995 affirms that education for tolerance could aim at countering factors that lead to fear and exclusion of others, and could help young people to develop capacities for independent judgment, critical thinking and ethical reasoning. Critical thinking is used as a way of deciding whether a claim is true, partially true, or false. It is a tool by which one can come about reasoned conclusions based on a reasoned process.